अस्सलाम वालेकुम व्यूवर्स। आज हमारा टॉपिक है इस्लाम, द रिलीजन, हिस्ट्री एंड सिविलाइजेशन ऑफ इस्लाम। इस वीडियो में इस्लाम के बारे में आपको बताऊंगी, इसकी हिस्ट्री बताऊंगी और सिविलाइजेशन बताऊंगी। इस्लाम कब राइज हुआ, ये सारी वीडियो में होगा। इसमें कंटेंट क्या है? इंट्रोडक्शन है, इस्लाम एंड द इस्लामिक वर्ल्ड, इस्लाम एज अ रिलीजन, doctrines and beliefs of Islam, the dimensions of Islam, Islamic practice, ethics and institution, a brief journey through Islamic history, school of Islamic thought and their history. In the name of God, the infinitely God, the All-Merciful. Introduction. Islam is both a religion and a civilization. इंट्रोडक्शन पहले मैं इस स्लाइड में आपको बताऊँ कि इस्लाम का इस्लाम इज़ बोथ अ रिलीजन एंड अ सिविलाइजेशन, a historical reality that spans over 14 countries of human history and a geographical presence in vast areas stretching over the Asian and African continents and even the parts of Europe. It is also a spiritual and meta-historical reality that has transformed the inner and outer life of numerous human beings in very different temporal and spatial circumstances. Today, over 1.2 billion people from different racial and cultural backgrounds are Muslim, and historically Islam has played. One would think, therefore, that the study of Islam would be widespread in the West and especially in America, which has a notable Muslim minority and which is now able to project so much power globally, including within the Islamist world. Such, however, is not the case despite the rise of interest in Islam since the tragic events of September 11, 2001. Moreover, much that is presented today in the English language as the study of Islam by so-called experts is strongly colored by various prejudices and ideologically basis, although there are exceptions. In fact, although Islamic studies have been carried out in the West for over 1,000 years, in each period such studies have been distorted and trained by a particular set of errors and deviations. The study of Islam in the West began in the 10th and 11th centuries because this was a time in which Europe was truly Christian. Islam was seen as a Christian heresy and its founder as an apostate. Soon the imminent threat to Western Christendom from Islam led many to call the Prophet of Islam the Antichrist, and the Quran itself was a period. Formal Islamic studies in the West may in fact be said to have begun during the Middle Ages. The Renaissance perpetuated religious opposition to Islam, but also began to show a disdain not only for Europe on medieval past but also for Islamic learning. Although there were some exceptions, furthermore, the emphasis on Eurocentrism during the Renaissance and the rise of humanism caused many European thinkers of that. The Renaissance perpetuated its religious opposition to Islam, but also began to show a disdain not only for Europe on medieval past but also for Islamic learning. Although there were some exceptions, furthermore, the emphasis on Eurocentrism during the Renaissance and the rise of humanism caused many European thinkers of that time to consider people of other civilizations and ethnic groups, including Muslims, inferior, although Islamic studies were still carried out on during the Renaissance and in some places, such as Bologna, even within the framework of the older medieval respect for Islamic thought. In many places, they were distorted by a sense of Western superiority and even a hybrids characteristics that were to continue into the modern period. The Enlightenment turned against the theological assertions of Christianity and substituted rationalism for a worldviews based on faith. Moreover, it further developed the ideas for the British government, but there were among the Orientalists in the late 19th and first half of the 20th century. Also, a number of noble scholars who studied Islam both objectively and with sympathy, such as Thomas Arnold, Sir Hamilton, Gibbs, Masgunon, and Henry Corbin. Later Western Orientalists who belong to this tradition include Marshall Hodgson, Anne-Marie Schimmel, and several other important scholars. But the main product of the Orientalist manner of studying Islam remained heavily based not only as a result of the interest of those powers it was serving but also through the absolutization of current Western concepts and methodologies that were applied to Islam with the sense of superiority and hubris going back to the Renaissance definition of European man. The last half of the 20th century witnessed a major transformation in Islamic studies in the West, at least in certain circles. First of all, a number of actually intelligent and spiritually aware Westerners who realized the spiritual poverty of modernism began to seek wisdom in other worlds body of writings rooted in authentic teachings of Islam, yet formulated in the intellectual language of the West and based on the confirmation, not the Daniel, of the spiritual teachings on which traditional Western civilization itself was founded. Furthermore, during this same period, authentic representatives of the Islamic traditions, those who were born and brought up in that tradition, began to study Western thought and languages and gradually to produce works in European language on Islam that were not simply apologetic as had been the earlier work in English of a number of Indian Muslim writers, but explained clearly and without compromise the teachings of Islam in a manner comprehensible to Westerners. Needless to say, during this period there also appeared a large number of completely modernized Muslim writers sorry, who wrote about Islam not from within the Islamic worldview but from the point of view of the ever changing categories of modern and more recently postmodern Western thought. Sorry. Slide में हम some academics continue to apply non-Islamic and in fact purely secularist concepts drawn from various currents of Western philosophy and social sciences to Islam. And then there are political ideologies who often have a little knowledge of Islam yet are presented as experts on the subject. From them one hears the most egregious anti-Islamic statements touted in the media and in popular books as authentic knowledge of Islam. Sorry. They are joined in this chorus by a number of Christian voices from extremist groups who speak as if they were living in 12th century France at the time of the Crusades, but who are at the same time completely devoid of knowledge of traditional Christian theology, not to mention Christian humility and charity. Each period of the study of Islam in the West has produced its own literature, usually colored by the prejudices of the period, which have been for the most part anti-Islamic. There is in fact no religion in the world about which Western authors have written so much, and at the same time in such a pejorative way as Islam, and yet despite the Persis truth of the teachings of Islam as it has been understood by its adherents over the ages. Islam is not only a religion, it is also the creator and living spirit of a major world civilization with a long history stretching over 14 countries. Islamic history concerns the historic existence of the peoples of many lands, from North Africa to Malaysia, over vast spans of time. It has witnessed the creation of some of the greatest empires and the integration into a single social order of many diverse ethnic integrations into a single social order of many diverse ethnic and linguistic groups. Islamic history has moreover directly affected the history of Europe for over a millennium and has been in turn deeply affected by the West since the advent of the colonial period. Islamic history has furthermore been profoundly intertwined with the history of India since the 7th century and with certain aspects of Chinese history for the past millennium, and to some extent even before that, going back to the century following the rise of Islam. Islam created a civilization that has covered the Middle in this book. I deal briefly with both Islamic history and the intellectual dimensions of Islam and its civilization. But in such an introductory work, it is not possible to also adequately cover the arts and sciences. Yet, it must be remembered how significant they are for an understanding of Islamic civilization and various Islamic cultures. Because Islam, like Judaism, does not permit the making of a divine image. It has produced an iconic scared art in which the presence of God is indicated by geometric patterns, arabesques, rhythmic repetitions, and empty space pointing to unity rather than by icons. Islam has made the chanting and writing of the word of God, that is, the Quran, its highest sacred arts. Hence, the central role of Quranic psalmody and calligraphy, which are ubiquitous in Islamic civilization. Next, it has honored architecture, which creates space in which the word of God reverberates, and therefore, like calligraphy, is related in its essential form and function to the divine word. Furthermore, Islamic art has paid special attention to the arts that concern us most in our everyday. Islamic civilization developed into several distinct cultural zones, including the Arabic, Persian, Black African, Turkic, Indian, Malay, and Chinese. In each of these zones, Islamic culture and art were to have a certain distinct local style while preserving their universal Islamic character. For example, Moroccan and Turkish architecture are both distinct yet deeply Islamic in character. Also in calligraphy, certain local styles such as Maghrib in Morocco, Andalusia, Algeria, and Shikasta in Persia developed. While in the same lands, one sees the Kufic, Tulut, Nuskat styles, which are universal throughout the Islamic world. Islamic civilization produced a very rich tradition in the arts of poetry and music. There are a very few civilizations of the past 2 millennia in which so much attention has been paid to poetry and in which poetry has occupied such as exalted positions as in Islam. All major Islamic languages such as Arabic, Persian, Turkish, Swahili, Bengali, and Urdu, as well as more local languages such as Sindhi, Pashto, and Hausa have a rich poetic tradition and military bands, and other forms of music associated with certain occasions or occasions, such as weddings. Islamic civilization discouraged and externalizing music that would simply intensify the worldly passions within the soul. Rather, it drew music toward the inner passion. Sorry. Toward the inner dimension of human existence. In the hands of Sufis, music become a shield with which the soul could journey from the outward realm of existence to the inner courtyard of the soul where the divine presence resides. Islamic civilization created many musical instruments such as the tar and the oud, which were to find their counterparts in the guitar and the lute in the West. Furthermore, Islamic philosophers and theoreticians of music wrote notable works on theory, structure, notation. Presence besides Islamic civilization created many musical instruments such as the tar and oud, which were to find their counterparts in the guitar and the lute in the West. Furthermore, Islamic philosophers and theoreticians of music wrote notable works on theory, structure, notation, and the effects of music on the soul as well as the body. Works that are attracting new interest in the West today, where much attention is being paid again to the philosophy of music, and especially the relation between music, music and physical and psychological healing. The contributions of Islamic science are so great and created the new disciplines of trigonometry and algebra. Likewise, in medicine, they furthered the studies of Hippocratic and Galenic medicine, while diagnosis and distinguishing new diseases, discovering new remedies, and proposing new theories. The same can be said for numerous other sciences, from alchemy, the astronomy, from the same can be said for numerous other key sciences, from alchemy to astronomy, from physics to geology. The global history of science has as one of its central chapters Islamic science, without which there would an understanding of nature and the role of the sciences of nature in the total scheme of knowledge that was very different from what developed in the West with the 17th century scientific revolution. In trying to understand Islamic civilization, it is essential to remember not only the diversity of the arts and the sciences, but also the diversity of theologically and philosophically interpretations of Islamic doctrines and even of Islamic laws. There is nothing more erroneous than thinking that Islam is a monolithic reality and that Islamic civilization did not do not did not. Quran sayings of the Prophet. In trying to understand Islamic civilization, it is essential to remember not only the diversity of the arts and sciences, but also the diversity of theological and philosophical interpretations of Islamic doctrines and even of Islamic law. There is nothing more erroneous than thinking that Islam is a monolithic reality and that Islamic civilization did not allow this creation or subsistence of diversity. Although a sense of unity has at all the times dominating every time Islamic, there has always existed a diversity of interpretations of the religion itself as well as various aspects of Islamic thought and culture. The Prophet of Islam even considered the diversity of views of scholars of Islamic community a blessing from God when one studies Islamic civilization. One studies Islamic civilization, one sees not only difference of languages and dress, writing and singing, color of skin and physical features, cuisine and response to different climatic conditions, but also different interpretations of verses of the Quran, saying of the Prophet, and tenets of the divine law, as well as theological and physiological questions, and yet a remarkable unity predominates in the civilization as it does in the religion that created that civilization and has guided its history over the ages. In this book, I hope to provide a clear and sufficient introduction to the religion of Islam, as well as its history and civilization, at least in its intellectual aspects. The present work, as all of my earlier writing of Islam, is written from within the Islamic perspective and from the traditional point of view. From the perspective and from the traditional point of view, from the perspective of the sacred and universal teaching of Islam, as they were revealed and later transmitted over the ages. This point of view stands opposed to both modernism and its complements so-called fundamentalism, and speaks from the from the view of those Muslims who have remained faithful to their sacred traditions despite the onslaught of secularizing forces that have invaded the Islamic world during the past 2 centuries, and reactions to those forces in the form of narrow fundamentalism or extremism of one kind or another. The norm in this Islamic world even today, despite all the political tragedies that have befallen it, is not what many in the media and popular literature in the West claim. It is not religious extremism or fundamentalism, not in comparison to which both secularist modernism and fundamentalism are extremes. At the present juncture of human history, it is of the utmost importance for Westerners who seek understanding and goodwill to comprehend clearly and norm with to comprehend clearly to the norm with respect to which all forms of extremism must be measured, and it is important to distinguish authentic knowledge of the subject matter at hand from ideologically distorted accounts of it. The present book is related especially to two others of my works, Ideals and Realities of Islam and the Heart of Islam. The first was written over 35 years ago and deals slowly with classical Islam from the traditional point of view. According to some, it has become a classic introduction to this subject in many languages and has been reprinted numerous times over the years. It does not, however, deal with Islamic history and the intellectual aspects of Islamic civilization, as does the present book, The Heart of Islam, which is being published nearly at the same time as this book deals with various aspects of Islam in direct response to the challenges posed by the tragedy of September 11, 2001, and the question raised in the minds of many Westerns as a result of that horrific events. Each of these works is distinct into itself, and yet this book, in a sense, completely complement the other two. What they have in common, besides the subject matter of Islam, is the universalist perspective and respect for other religions, to which the Quran refers so often and which has been my perspective in all of my life writing for more than 4 decades. I hope that this short work will facilitate better mutual understanding between Westerns and Muslims. Westerns and Muslims, and understanding essential to the survival of both East and West. I wish to thank Stephen Helmsman of Harper's San Francisco for making the appearance of this volume possible. This work was originally a part of our religions, but it has been revised and includes a new introductions and bibliography. I also wish to thank Catherine O'Brien for preparing the manuscripts of this work for publication. Islam and the Islamic world. The significance of the study of Islam today. These days, the reality of Islam penetrates the consciousness of contemporary Westerners from nearly every direction, whether it is consequence of the decades old Middle Eastern conflict between Arabs and Jews, the aftershocks of the upheavals of the Iranian Revolution, the civil war in the Yugoslavia, where Muslims were caught between feuding Orthodox Serbs and Catholic Croats, the breakup of Muslim republics, the tragic events of September 11, 2001 in New York and Washington and their aftermath, or the ever more frequent use of Muslim names in the pages of American newspapers. It seems that the name and the reality of Islam have come to constitute an important dimension of the life of humanity today, even in America and Europe. And yet, there is no major religion whose study is more distorted in the West and than Islam, which is too familiar to be considered an exotic religion, and yet distinct enough from Christianity, both as the other as it has in fact done in the West for well over a millennia. The study of Islam as a religion and as the presenting ideal or dominating principle of a major world civilization is of a great significance for the West, not only because it makes better known the worldwide of more than a billion makes better billion or 200 million people, ranging from blue-eyed slaves and Berbers to black Africans, from Arabs to Malays, and from Turks and Persians to Chinese. It is also significant because Islam and its civilization have played a far greater role than is usually admitted in the genesis and development of European and American civilization. Today, Islam constitutes the second largest religious community in Europe and has a population almost the size of Judaism in America. But most of all, the study of Islam is significant because it concerns a message from God revealed within that very Abrahamic world from which Judaism and Christianity originated. The Islamic revelation is the third and final revenge. Revelation of Abrahamic monotheistic cycle and constitutes a major branch of the tree of monotheism. It is therefore a religion without whose studies the knowledge of the whole religious family to which Jews and Christians belong would be incomplete. Islam as the final revelation a return to the primordial religion. Islamic considers itself the last major world religion in the current history of humanity and believes that there will be no other planetary revelation after it until the end of human history and the coming of the eschatological events described so eloquently in the final chapters of the Quran, which is the verbatim word of God in Islam. That is why the Prophet of Islam is called Seal of Prophets, Khatamul Anbiya. Islam sees itself as the final link in a long chain of prophecy that goes back to Adam, who was not only the father of humanity, Abul Bashar, but also the first prophet. There is in fact but a single religion, that divine unity, Al-Tawheed, which has constituted the heart of all messages from heaven, and which Islam has come to assert in its final form. The Islamic message is therefore none other than the acceptance of God as the one Al-Ahad and the submission to Him, which result in peace. Hence the name of Islam, which means simply surrender to the will of the one God, called Allah in Arabic. To become a Muslim, it is sufficient to bear testimony before two Muslims witnesses that there is no God but God. La ilaha illallah, and that Muhammad is the messenger of God, Muhammad Rasulullah. These two testimonies, shahadas, contains the alpha and omega of the Islamic messages. One asserts the unity of the divine principle, and the other the receptions of the messages of unity through the person whom God chooses as his final prophet. The Quran continuously emphasizes the doctrine of unity and oneness of God, and it can be said that the very ancient nature of Islam is to assert in a final and categorical manner the oneness of God and the nothingness of all before the majesty of the One, as the chapter 1 on unity, Surah Al-Tawheed in the Quran asserts, say He God is one, God the eternally besought of all, He vecta not, nor is he begotten, and there is none like unto him. The term Allah used in this and other verses of the Quran refers not to a tribal or ethnic god, but to the supreme divine principle in the Arabic language. Arab Christians and Arabized Jews in fact refer to God as Allah, as do Muslims. The Arabic word Allah is therefore translatable as God, provided his terms is understood to include the Godhead and is not identified solely with Christians' Trinitarian doctrines. Islam in asserting over and over again the omniscience and omnipotence as well as mercy and generosity of God and the one puts the seal of finality upon what it can considers to be universal religious messages. As such, it also places the primordial reality of human beings directly before the divine presence, and it is this primordial nature hidden at the heart of all men and women that the Quran addresses. That is why, according to the Quran, even before the creation of the world, God asked human beings, "Am I not your Lord?" And not one person, but the whole of humanity, both unity. Islam is not both male and female answered, "Yes, verily, while we bear witness," as the final religion of humanity. Islam is the last divinely orchestrated response of yes to the eternal divine question, the response that constitutes the very definitions of being a human, by virtue of its insistence upon divine oneness and pre-eternal response of humanity to the lordship of the one. Islam also signifies the return to the primordial religion and names itself accordingly Dinul Fitra, the religion that is in the nature of things, or Dinul Hanif, the primordial religion of unity. Islam is not based on a particular historical event or an ethnic collectively, but on the Quran in fact refers to Abraham, who lived long before the historic manifestations of Islam, as a Muslim as well as Hanif, that is, belonging to the primordial monotheism that survived among a few despite the fall of the majority of men and women of later Arab society, preceding the rise of Islam into a cross form of idolatry and polytheism that Muslims identify with the age of ignorance. Islam is a return not only to the religion of Abraham, but even to that of Adam, restoring primordial monotheism without identifying it with a single people, as it's seen in the case of Judaism, or a single event of human history, as one observes in the prevalent historical views of incarnation in Christian theology. The prophet asserted that he brought nothing new but simply reframed the truth that always was this promotional. Character of the Islamic message is reflected not only in its essentiality, universality, and simplicity, but also in its inclusive attitude towards the religions and forms of wisdoms that preceded it. Islam has always claimed the earlier prophets of the Abrahamic world and even the pre-Abrahamic world, Noah and Adam, as its own, to the extent that these central spiritual and religious figures play an important role in everyday Islamic piety than they do in Christian religious life. Also, as a result, Islam has been able to preserve something of the ambience of the Abrahamic world in what survives of traditional Islamic life. Westerners who journey to traditional Muslim areas even today are usually reminded of the world of Hebrew prophets and the Christ and of Christ himself. It was not, however, only the Abrahamic world that became included in Islamic's understanding of itself as both the final and the primordial religion, as Islam encountered non-Semitic religions later on in Persia, India, and elsewhere. The same principle of the universality of revelation applied. The result was that many of the philosophies and schools of thoughts of the ancient world were fairly easily integrated into the Islamic intellectual perspective as long as they conformed to or affirmed the principle of unity. In this case, they were usually considered remnants of the teachings of early prophets, constituting part of the Dadway's family that brought the messages of God's oneness to every people and race. As the Quran asserts, one of the results of this primordial character of Islam, therefore, was the formation and development of Islamic intellectual tradition as a repository for much of the wisdoms of the ancient world, ranging from the Greco-Alexandria heritage to that of India. As every vertebral omega is also an alpha, Islam as the terminal religion of humanity is also a return of the primordial religion in its categorical and final formulation of the doctrine of unity. It returns to the primordial messages that bound Adam to God and that defines the religion as such. The universality of Islam may be said to issue from this return to the primordial religion, whereas its particularity may be said to be related to its finality. Which has provided the distinctive form for one of the world's major religions. Unity and diversity within the Islamic tradition, Sunnism and Shiism. Unity cannot be manifest itself without entering into the world of multiplicity, yet the manifestation is the means whereby humanity is led from multiplicity to unity. Islam's great emphasis on unity, therefore, could not prevent diversity on the formal level, nor could Islam have integral a vast segment of humanity with diverse ethnic, linguistic, and cultural backgrounds without making possible diverse interpretations of its techniques. These techniques nevertheless led to that unity residing at the heart of the Islamic messages as long as the interpreters of them remain within the framework of Islamic orthodoxy and orthodoxy, considered in their widest and most universal sense. The Islamic religion, therefore, is comprised of diverse schools and the and interpretations that are deeply rooted and united in the principles of the Islamic revelation. The most important elements among those that unite the vast spectrum of schools The most important elements among those that unite the vast spectrum of schools composing Islam in its orthodox manifestations, this term being understood in a metaphysical as well as theological and juridical manners, are the two treatises among themselves by virtue of the first. Shahada, that is, there is no God but God. All Muslims confirm the unity of the divine principle and the reliance of all things on him. Through the second Shahada, Muhammad is the messenger of God. They accept the prophethood of the prophet, and there becomes specifically Muslims. Moreover, all Muslims agree that the Quran is the verbatim revelation of God. They also agreed about its text and content. There, that is, no variant texts are found among any of the schools, although the exegetical meanings can, of course, differ from one school to another. Muslims also agreed concerning the reality of the afterlife, although again there are various types and levels of interpretations of the techniques, teachings of the Quran and the Hadith, saying of the Prophet concerning technological and time matters. Muslims are also united in the main rituals performed, ranging from the daily prayers to fasting to making this pilgrimage. Although here again there are certain small differences in ritual details among the various schools of Islamic law. Finally, one must mention the spirit emanating from the Quranic revelation and the grace barakah of the prophets issuing from his being and his sunnah's deeds, and resulting from the very fact that Islam is a living religion with its channels to heaven open here and now, not only an event of past history. These less defendable factors are nevertheless powerful elements that unify Islam and the Islamic world. They also poses more concrete manifestations, especially in Sufism, Islam's mystical or esoteric dimensions, which in the form of Sufi orders covers the whole of the Islamic world and provides a hidden yet power. Full of force of our unity, full of force for the unity of the world. The presence of these factors is ubiquitous and can hardly be denied, even externally. Their effect is to be seen all the way from the manner in which Quranic chanting in Arabic transforms the soul of Muslims everywhere, whether they are Arabs or Bengalis, to the architectures and urban planning of Islamic cities, whether they are in Morocco or Persia, from the way in which traditional Muslim men dress to the way people take off their shoes when entering the traditional Muslim house, whether it is in Senegal or Malaysia. Within this unity, which is perceptible even to outsiders, diversity exists on various levels: exegetical, legal, theological, philosophical, social, and political. In fact, the Prophet has said the difference of view among the scholars of many communities is a blessing from God. Throughout the history of Islam, there have existing diverse interpretations of the Quran and Hadith, so different schools of law, many theological and philosophical interpretations, and political claims on the basis of the interpretation of religions. Interpretations of religious texts. These differences have sometimes led to not only fierce religious rivalries but also was a phenomenon that is, however, not unique to Islam. Differences, however, have never been able to destroy the unity of Islam as either as religion or civilization. It was in reference to the danger of excessive theological and religious dispute that the Prophet said that the Islamic community would divide after him into 72 schools, of which only one would be completely in the right and would possess the complete truth. In this saying, he predicted not only the contention of the various schools that would appear in time, but also the persistence of the truth, which could not in its most universal senses be other than that of the two shahadas. Furthermore, the Prophet was not referring to the vertical and hierarchical dimensions of Islam and levels of interpretation of its truth, which do not represent diversity, and opposition in the same sense, and to which we shall turn later in this work. But also the persistence of the truth, which could not in its most universal sense but be other than that of the two shahadas. Furthermore, the Prophet was not referring to the vertical and hierarchical dimensions of Islam and levels of interpretations of its truth, which do not represent diversity and oppositions in the same sense, and to which we shall turn later in this work. Nearly all Muslims belong to one of three groups: Sunnis, Shiites, and Kharijis. This last group comprises those who oppose the claim of both Ali and Muawiyah to the Caliphate, which will be discussed later. Kharijis have always been few in number, and today their minorities known as Ibadis remain conformed to Oman and Central Iraq. The most important division within the Islam is between Sunnism and Shiism. The vast majority of Muslims, that is about 86 to 87%, are Sunnis. As a term of the that comes from Ahl Sunnah wal Jamaat followers to the Sunnah of the Prophet, and majority about 13 to 14% of Muslims. Muslims are Shiites, a word that derives from Shia Ali, the partisan of Ali ibn Abi Talib. They in turn are divided into 12 Imam Shiites, Ismails and Zaitis. The 12th Imam or Itna Shiites are by far the most numerous, comprising some 150 million people living mostly in present day. People living mostly in present day Iran, Iraq, Lebanon, the Persian Gulf states, eastern Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, Pakistan, and India. Iran, Iraq, Uzbekistan, and Bahrain have majority. 12 Imam Shiite populations, which in Lebanon the Shiites constitute the largest single religious Islam played an important role in Islamic history and established their own caliphate in Egypt during the Fatimid period in the 4th, 10th, and 5th, 11th centuries. Today, however, they are scattered in various communities, mostly in a number of towns of Pakistan and India, but also with important concentration in East Africa, Syria, and the Pamir and the Hindus, Kush regions of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Tajikistan. They also have a notable community in Canada consisting mainly of immigrants from East Africa, India, and Pakistan. Ismails are divided into two main branches, one with its center in India and the other in scattered communities under the directions of Aga Khan, whose followers considered him their Imam or spiritual and temporal leader. It is difficult to give an exact figure for the members of this community, but altogether the Ismailis are estimated to be a few million in number. Finally, several million Zaydis, who among various schools of Shiism are theologically the closest to Sunnism. Reside almost roughly in Yemen. The Shiite is separated from the Sunnis upon the death of the Prophet. When the questions of successions become vital, the majority of the community choose Abu Bakr, the venerable friend of the Prophet and the first Khalifa from the Arabic Khalifa, meaning in this context the big vicegerent of the Prophet occurred, while a small number believed that Ali, the cousin and son-in-law of the Prophet, should have become Khalifa. The problem was, however, more profound than one of the personalities. It also concerned the function of the person who was to succeed the Prophet. The Sunnis believed that the functions of such a person should be to protect the divine law, act as a judge, and rule over the community, preserving public order and the border of the Islamic world. The Shiites believed that such a person should also be able to interpret the Quran and the law, and in fact reposes in word knowledge. Therefore, he had to be chosen by God and the Prophet, not by the community. Such a figure was called Imam. Although such a person did not share in the Prophet's prophetic functions, he did received the inner spiritual power and the Prophet. Moreover, the Shiites identified this person with Ali ibn Abi Talib, whom they believed the Prophet chose as his successor before his death. Shiism is therefore very much related to the family of the Prophet. Al-Bayt, Ahl Bayt, the later Imams, all being descendants of Ali and Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet. Shia's Imam is also considered by Shiism as the only legitimate ruler of the Islamic community. Hence the rejections by Shiism, the first three caliphs, as well as the Shiism Imam is also considered by Shiism as the only legitimate ruler of the Islamic community. Hence the rejections by Shiism, the first three caliphs, as well as the later Sunni caliphs, 12 Imams. Shiism therefore have rejected until the Iranian Revolution of 1979 all existing political authority ever since the short-lived Caliph of Ali came to be an abroad, and with his assassinations they believe that the 12th Imam, the Mahdi, is in occupations that is not outwardly present in the world, and yet all legitimate political power must derive from him, and he will appear one day to bring justice and peace to the world as a part of eschatological events that will bring the human history to a close since 1979 and the Iranian Revolution, as a result of which Shiitism religion figures rule directly in Iran. New interpretations of the relations between religious and governmental authority have been made, but the significance and role of the hidden Imam remains unchanged. Shiism became particularly consolidated with the martyrdom of the third Imam, Hussein ibn Ali, who was killed in the first 7th century along with most of the members of his and therefore the Prophet's immediate family by his army of the Umayyad Khalifa Yazid in Karbala in Iraq. His body is buried there, but his head was brought to a Cairo where it was interred, and a shrine was built for it. Shrine that remains the heart of the city of the day to this day. Henceforth, 12 Imam Shiism continued as a protest movement of increasing political significance, but did not gain complete political power over any extensive area of Islamic world until the Safavids conquered Persia in 907. And established 12 Imam Shiism as the official state religion. As for Ismailism, it had major political manifestations earlier in Islamic history, especially with the establishment of the Fatimids, who ruled a vast area from Tunisia to Syria with their base in Egypt from 297 to 909 to 567 to 1171. Turning to Zionism, its power base became Yemen, where its followers ruled until the invasion by Egypt in 1962. Shiism, however, must not be considered simply a political movement. Rather, Shiism developed its own school of law, theology, philosophy, and other religious sciences, including methods of Quranic exegesis, debates, and sometimes confrontations continued in the various religious sciences between Shiites and Sunnis positions, dialogue that played no small role in the development of religions through both worlds. However, despite periods of Sunni Shiism's political and sometimes military confirmations, and the exploitation of these differences by Western powers that began to colonize the Islamic world in the 11th 17th century. Sunnis and Shiism have also lived in peace in many climes and times, especially during the past century. The religious scholars have sought to create current on the basis of the many elements that unite them within the embrace of the totality of the Islamic tradition. Besides Sunnism and Shiism, other diversities of a less significant nature need to be mentioned. For example, there are theological and philosophical differences among various schools mentioned in the class of writings with the title Al-Milal wal Nihal, literally religious groups and schools of thought. Many of these can be compared to, let us say, the Bonaventurean and Thomistic interpretations of medieval Christian theology, but others develops into what one can call a veritable sect in contrast to Sunnism and Shiism, which constitute Islamic orthodoxy and should not be world. However, despite periods of Sunnism, political and sometimes military confrontations and exploitation of these different by Western powers, and began to colonialism and Islamic world in the 11th 17th century. Besides Sunnis and Shiism, other diversities of a less significant nature need to be mentioned. For example, there are theological and philosophical differences. Islamic societies, although their nature and teachings are in most cases very different from each other and from those of the vast Islamic majority, the Islamic community and ethnic and cultural groups within it. One of the key concepts in Islam is that of Ummah, or the totality of the people who are Muslims and constitute the Islamic world. Islam sees history itself in religious terms and refers to other people not to primarily by their linguistics or ethnic. The Islamic Ummah is one bound by solidarity to Quranic message of divine. This despite all the turmoil that has pitted and continues to pit Muslims against one another, God has warned against such divisiveness in the verses and hold fast all of you together to the cable of God and do not separate. One cannot understand Islam without going a sense of the significance of the concepts of Ummah and the reality of that community, which, although no longer politically united, is nevertheless a single religious community characterized by that sense of brotherhood so much emphasized by the Quran and the Prophet. The Ummah is not, however, composed of a single ethnic, racial, or cultural group. Islam was from the beginning a religion that addressed the whole of humanity, and strongly opposed all forms of racialism and tribalism, as the flowing famous Quranic verses pointed out so clearly. O mankind, lo, we have created you male and female, and have made you nations and tribes that ye may know one another. Although the noblest of you is the sight of God, is the most righteous. The later history of Islam was to bear out its global destiny. Over the centuries, Arabs and Persians, Turks and Indians, Black Africans and Malays, Chinese and some Tibetans, Mongolians and Slavs have become part of the Ummah, and during the past few decades, Islam has been separating in Europe, North and South America, and to some extent Australia. There is hardly any ethnic or racial group in the world that does not have some membrane belonging to the Islamic Ummah. This can be seen physically in the annual pilgrimage to Mecca, where people from every corner of the global assemble to worship at the house rebuilt by Chinese, Indians, and many other ethnic groups. The spread of Islam occurred in waves in less than a century after the establishment of the first Islamic society in Medina by the Prophet. Arabs armies had conquered a land stretching from the Indus River to France, and brought with them Islam, which, contrary to popular Western conceptions, was not, however, forced on the people by the sword. In some places, such as Persia, it took several centuries for the majority of people to embrace Islam, long after Arab military power had ceased. Later, Islam spread peacefully through Sufi teachers among the Turkic people of Central Asia before their migration south to the western regions of Central Asia, and finally westward through northern Persia to Anatolia. It also spread peacefully, again mostly by means of Sufism, through most of the Indian subcontinent from the 5th 11th century onward, and throughout Java, Sumatra and Malaya from the 8th 14th century on. Since about the 12th 18th century, Islam has been separate, ending yet again mostly through the agency of Sufism, ever for ethnic diversity that has not destroyed the unity of the Ummah at all, but rather has enriched it. For unity is not uniformity. In fact, it stands diametrically opposed to uniformity. When one looks at the Islamic world today, one sees several major ethnic and cultural zones with their own subdivisions, but unified in their attachments of the Islamic tradition and composing in their totality the Islamic Ummah. The global distribution of Muslims and zones of Islamic civilization. Most people in the West automatically identify Muslims with Arab. Today, however, Arabs compose about a fifth of the world Muslim population, but they remain of central importance in the Ummah because of their historical role in Islamic world. Their languages, which is that of the Quran, and the significance for all Muslims of the sacred sites of Islam that lie within the Arab world, especially the cities of Mecca and Medina in the Mecca and Medina in the Hejaz in present-day Saudi Arabia, and Old Jerusalem, which was historically in Palestine but has been occupied by Israel since 1967. Today, over 220 million Muslims are flees from Mauritania to Iraq. The Arab identification the Arab identifications is made not ethnically but linguistically, that is a person whose mother tongue is Arabic is considered an Arab. The vast majority of Arabs are of courses Muslims, although in certain Arab countries such as Lebanon, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. Well as among the Palestinians, there is a sizable Arab, Christian population, and before the partition of Palestine, highly culturally Arabized Jewish communities also existed in most Arab countries. There are many subcultures within the Arab world, but the main division is between the Eastern and the Western Arabs, the line of demarcations being somewhere in Libya, each part, while profoundly Islamic and Arabic, has its local cultural color and traits which can be seen in the literature, architecture, and other arts and cuisine of the two areas. The second oldest ethnic and culture zone of the Islamic world is the Persian, comprising not only the people of present day Iran but also those of similar ethnic and linguistic stock, including the Kurds and the people of Afghanistan, including the Pashtos, Tajikistan, part of Uzbekistan, and Pakistan. Together, they number over 100 million people and are of particular historic and cultural importance because during the Ottoman occupation of Balkans, Islamic communities were established, especially in Albania, Macedonia, Bosnia, and Kosovo. Some of these communities are over 500 years old. It is generally believed that Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world today. The phase of the separate of Islam brought the people of many different ethnic and cultural backgrounds into the same Ummah, yet like these types of diversity already mentioned, this ethnic diversity is not destroyed the unity of the Ummah at all, but rather has enriched it for unity. One looks at the Islamic world today, one sees several major ethnic and cultural zones with their own subdivisions, but unified in their attachment to the Islamic tradition. The global distribution of Muslims and zones of Islamic. Most people in Western automatically identify Muslims with Arabs. Today, however, Arabs compose about a fifth of the world Muslims population, but they remain of central importance in the Ummah because of their historical role in the Islamic world. Their languages, which is that of the Quran, and the significance for all Muslims of the scared sides of Islam that lie within the Arab world, especially the cities of Mecca and Medina. Muslims had established thriving empires in sub-Saharan Africa by the 7th-13th century, and Islam in Africa has been and continues to be a vital and vibrant force even during the period of European colonization. Today, around 150 million black African Muslims as distinct from the Berber North Africans couples are notable zone of Islamic civilization. Black Africa speaks many different languages such as Fulani, Hausa, and Swahili, and constitute many subcultures. But the main division in this part of the Islamic world is between East and West Africa. Although again, a strong bond of unity exists between the two areas. They are bridged by numerous links, including the Sufi orders, which have had a major role in the separate of Islam in Africa and are still very active in most regions of Muslims. Black Africa and Islam separated into a Malay world later than in the areas already mentioned. Starting in the 8th 14th century, today this world includes the most populated and ethnically homogeneous of all Islamic countries. Indonesia, it has a rich Islamic culture, embracing in additions to Indonesia, Malaysia, Brunei, the southern Philippines, and certain areas of Thailand and Cambodia, as well as a part of Singapore. This zone is characterized by it use Malay as its main literary tongue, and the adaptations of Islam to a particular natural and cultural environment very different from what one finds in the cradle of classical Islamic civilization in the Middle East. More than 220 million Muslims are scattered in the West area, which includes thousands of islands as well as Malay Peninsula. Less is known about Chinese Muslims than other groups in the Islamic world. Their number is estimated anywhere from 25 to 100 millions, and they are scattered all over China, with the main concentration being in the western province of Xinjiang, the old eastern Turkestan. They are an old community. There are records of Muslims in Canton in the first 7th century, and they have created a distinct Chinese Islamic culture of their own, including their own distinct style of Arabic calligraphy. There is also a corpus of Chinese Islamic literature, most of which remains unknown to the outside world, but Muslims remains an important minority in China as they do in certain other countries, from Burma in South Asia to Sweden in North European. France, Indians, Pakistans, and Bangladeshi in Great Britain, and Turkish and Kurds in Germany. There are also a number of European converts to Islam. Muslims now constitute important communities in many areas and have even posed culture and social challenges in some countries, such as France. There is no doubt There is no doubt that many of the slaves brought out from Africa to North America were originally Muslim, but their religion was gradually forgotten since the 1930s. How However, Islam has been separating among African Americans and how represents a notable religious voice in America. Today, about 6 million uh, Today, about 6 million Muslims live in North America, consisting not only for African Americans and Arabs but also some Persians, Turks, and peoples of the Indian subcontinent who have migrated to America during the past century, and especially during the past few decades. A number of Americans and Canadians of European stock have also embraced Islam. Thus, the Islamic community continued to grow in North America as well as in Central and South America. Contenders and constitute important minorities in many lands and nations. They possess their own languages and cultures and yet participate in the greater whole, that is the Ummah and the Islamic civilization of which they are all members. Islam is a very vast tapestry in which all these local cultures, moods, and varieties are woven like arabesques. The larger pattern they make reflect the oneness of the divine principle. Islam as religion. Next number, Islam as a religion. The Islamic understanding of the role of religion in human life. The term in Arabic term in Arabic that corresponds most to religion is al-din, whereas religions comes from the Latin root religare, meanings to bind, and therefore by implications that which binds us to God. Al-din is said by some Arabic grammars. The Islamic understanding of the role of religion in human life. The term in Arabic that corresponds most closely to religions is al-din, whereas religions comes from the Latin root religare, meanings to bind, and therefore by implications that which binds us to God. Al-din is said by some Arabic grammarians and Quranic commentators to derive from al-diyan, which means debit. Al-din therefore means the repaying of our debt to God and involves the whole of our life, because we are indebted to God not only for individual gifts but most of all for the gifts of existence itself. For the Muslim's mind, it is the most obvious of facts and greatest of certitudes that by ourselves we are nothing and God is everything, that we own nothing by ourselves and that all belongs to God. According to the Quranic verse, God is the rich and we are the poor. We are poor in our very essence. We are poor not necessarily in an economic, social, or even physical senses, but in an ontological one. Therefore, all that we are and all that we have belongs to God, for which we are indebted to Him, and for whose gifts we must give thanks. Religion or al-din, which is inseparable from the sense of the reality of this depth, therefore embraces the whole of the life and is inseparable from life itself. In the Islamic perspective, religion is not seen as a part of life or a special kind of activity like art. Through commerce, social discourse, politics. Rather, it is the matrix and worldwide view within which these and all other human activities, efforts, creations, and thoughts take place or should take place. It is the very sap of the tree tool of life as well as chosen environment in which this tree, tree grows, as he has been said so often. Islam is not only a religion in the modern sense of the term, as it has been redefined in a secularized world in which the religious life occupies a vast small part of the daily activities of most peoples. Rather, Islam is religion as a total way of life. Islam does not even accept the validity of the with the abiding relatives of the other world, al dunya and al akhirah. But this dichotomy must not be confused with the division between the sacred and secular profane. Once can the world is a complete religious universe in which world lines Islam asserts that there is no extraterritoriality in religion and nor that nothing can exist legitimately outside the realm of tradition. The sense of religion and the application of its participles are the space and temporal history of a particular human collectively. Our Islam claims this all encompassing quality not only for itself but also for religion as such. Religion then must embrace the whole of the life. Every human thought and action must be ultimately related to the divine principles, which is the source of all that is, both the existence of the cosmic order, including the human world, and all the qualities to be found in the cosmos come from remains faithful to the true nature of the things and themselves. Religion is the reality that makes us the realization of the nexus between the human world in all of its aspects and God possible. Therefore, its role in human life is central. It can even be said from the Islamic point of view that religion in its most universal and essential senses is life itself. The private aspects of religion, although Islam has this all embracing the concepts of religions, it does divide the injunctions and teachings of religion into which concerns private life and what is related to the public domain. Although these two aspects are not seen as totally separate, on the contrary, they interlink. The private aspects of religion, although Islam has this all-embracing concepts of religion, it does divide the injunctions and teachings of religion into which concerns private life and what is related to the public domain. Although these two aspects, on the contrary, their interrelatedness is constantly emphasized. The private aspects are not seen as totally separate. On the contrary, their interrelatedness is constantly emphasized. The private aspects deal primarily with all that concerns the inner rapport of man and woman with God. They involve prayer in all its modes, from the individual supplications to the conventional prayers, salah, to the invocations of the names of the God. Religions which is constitutional prayers practiced especially by the Sufis and identified at the highest level with the prayer of the heart. The other major duties such as fasting and pilgrims, all of which will be treated later, also pertain to the private aspects of life. Islam also provides the principles for human actions as pertain to private life. First, a human being's treatment of his or her own body is governed by divine law. This include not only hygienic and dietary regulations of religious importance, but also the religious duty to care of the body, religious injunctions concerning all the sexual practice, and religious prohibitions of harming the body, including, of course, suicide, which is forbidden by Islamic law and considered a great sin. Many of these elements are needless to stay found in other religions. In fact, a fact which Islam points as a support for the view that religion is inseparable from the normal life of humanity. Islam, like Judaism, considers the dietary regulations to be of religious significance and a means of sacralizing everyday life. Muslims are forbidden to drink alcoholic beverage, eat pork and all its derivatives or consumers. I hope this is ये है थोड़ी सी इस्लाम के रिलीजन के बारे में बताया है इस वीडियो में और इंट्रोडक्शन ऑफ इस्लाम बताया हूँ. आई होप यू लाइक दिस वीडियो. खुदा हाफिज़.